So my name's Jenna Barnsley, and I was in the entrance Kong. I moved around the Central Coast, which is a bit north of Sydney. So I've been in a few different congregations throughout my childhood. I was born as a Jehovah's Witness, basically always on the Central Coast, a little bit in Sydney as well. Yeah.
Okay, so that's one of the most beautiful parts of Australia.
Yeah,
so good upbringing.
So
tell me about your just the upbringing when you got baptised. What happened as you were growing up?
Yeah, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. So I moved out to Australia when I was 6 from England, and I had a mum and a sister who were Jehovah's Witnesses, and an auntie and uncle and 2 cousins who were Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's all that we had in Australia and in the religion as well over here.
Not your dad?
No, my dad was very opposed to it. He always felt that it was the reason that we moved to Australia and that my mum and him didn't work out, which he wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, so obviously they would have definitely put wedges between them.
Mm.
Yeah. And I just went to a regular school. I definitely was never comfortable voicing that I was a Jehovah's Witness when I was in school. I didn't like being different and standing out in negative ways. I always kept my school life very separate to my Jehovah's Witness life, and that, I guess now I see that as I never truly felt like a real Jehovah's Witness, but because this was something that my family did and I knew the consequences of deciding not to be a Jehovah's Witness were very big, I tried to force myself constantly to try and be a Jehovah's Witness, whether that meant forcing myself to go out witnessing once a month because I knew that was the bare minimum I had to do.
Yeah, so, I think the point that you made though, that you were forcing yourself, you didn't really believe it. You didn't want to do it, but you're forcing it yourself. Because I think, especially these days, half of Jehovah's Witness kids don't believe it because they've got the internet, they can talk to people, they know about other things, they know it's bullshit, but they don't want to leave because their parents, how are the parents going to treat them and cope with it?
And at the end of the day, everybody, school is a survival. It's a survival place, and everybody just wants to survive, and you don't want to be different, and you don't want to stand out. And when it comes to the weekends and all your friends are going and doing school sports, extracurricular sports, and you're not allowed to, or I used to play the drums, and I'm not allowed to go out and be in bands, and thankfully Mum became more flexible in my older teen years with that. But
did you play the drums?
Yeah, I used to play the drums. Yeah, I was in a couple of bands.
Oh wow.
And I used to teach the drums as well when I was in high school. That was my first pocket money little job.
Wow.
Teaching the drums to younger children. Because I really just wanted to be a normal kid. I just all I ever wanted was just to be like my friends in school, to be able to hang out with them on weekends, go to the shopping centre with them, or go to parties with them. That's all I wanted. So I eventually started creating this secret life outside of the Jehovah's Witness religion. So I managed to convince my mum. I stopped hanging out with the kids in the hall, and I managed to convince Mum that she should let me just have a couple of friends, and then that she felt that she could trust at school. So she had a couple of girlfriends, and I was allowed to hang out with them, and it was all very strategic in being able to build the trust with their families and then be able to go out and try and live a normal life.
Your mum didn't mind you having worldly friends?
No, she was pretty good. Actually, what initially started my mum being comfortable with me having school friends was because I was stalked by a Jehovah's Witness when I was 15.
So this is really interesting because as a witness, you were told obviously the worldly people are dangerous. You need to be careful of worldly people, and you can trust Jehovah's Witnesses.
That's
and now
right.
it's coming out, as in the Royal Commission, that there's a lot that goes on amongst the witnesses, and because they don't report them to the police, these brothers or sometimes sisters maybe remain within the congregation. So what happened when you were 15?
So I was friends with a Jehovah's Witness guy, and he had a brother who, they were both adults, young adults, and he had a younger brother who became quite infatuated with me, and so I would go around to their house and I would I would be hanging out with my friend, and over a period of time he started becoming very obsessive with me, and him and I never had a close relationship like I did with his brother, and that was something that he really struggled to handle, and so he used to turn up to my house, and for example, if I wasn't home, he would be hanging around my house until we came home. My neighbours would start reporting to me that he was actually waiting out the front of my house for entire days for me to return. My neighbours made it aware that he was lingering around my house constantly, and so we went to the elders. And we were advised not to get an AVO out on him or take it to the police at all, because that would bring a reproach on Jehovah's name. So their main focus was making sure that Jehovah's name was sacred rather than my safety. So it became really extreme. I ended up sharing a room with mum because I was too scared to sleep on my own. And at 15, you're just coming into your teen years and learning how to start the process of becoming an adult. And I'm taking steps backwards because of this. And I used to have to walk through a bush track to get to school. And so basically the whole reason that I was able to start having school friends outside of school was because mum needed them for help with protection. So in the mornings she would invite them over for breakfast. So they would all come to school early and they loved it. A lot of them didn't get breakfast or whatever. So they would come over and mum would cook a big meal for all of us, bacon and eggs a lot. Sometimes she would make them sandwiches for school, and then they would then walk me to school. And she was known as one of the greatest mums for this because everybody loved her bacon and eggs. But at the end of the day, it was all done purely for safety for me because she wanted to know that I was going to be okay.
That's amazing that you needed worldly friends for your protection from a witness.
From a Jehovah's Witness man.
How old was that man?
So I think he was 18. Yeah, he was a very young adult, but I think legally he was still an adult. Mm-hmm. When I was 16, one of my school friends was having a birthday party, and we were down at the beach and we saw a couple of good-looking boys down there, and we started chatting to them, as you do. And I invited them to come to her birthday party, which was very exciting. Obviously, in my head, I was thinking, we might make out. This is so exciting. And obviously, in his head, he had completely different intentions. And so he came to the party and waited until I was very drunk, to the point where I needed to be taken to bed. He came into the room afterwards and forced me to have sex with him. So essentially, I lost my virginity through rape. And that was obviously it was a very traumatic experience because I fought for it to stop, and I couldn't in the end, and it's just what happened. And the hardest part though about being raped as a Jehovah's Witness in that situation was not the actual rape, it was the fact that I couldn't tell anybody. So I was on my own, and I didn't feel comfortable telling my mum because I didn't want her to be angry at me for going to a party. I obviously couldn't tell elders because I would have been completely shunned. So there was nobody to turn to. So for years and years I kept my little secret to myself. And unfortunately it changed my opinion on what sex is and what Jehovah's Witnesses present sex as, with a man and a woman in a marriage together. So I became quite abusive with sex, and I didn't understand what it was like to make love until I was about 18 or 19.
So you were having sex from 16 to 18?
Yeah, and very abusively. I would just use and abuse wherever I could, because I was just constantly trying to gain my power back that I had taken from me. So I was baptised at 17 anyway, so I had a little good stint for maybe half a year or something, and I thought, you know what, I want to be a Jehovah's Witness, I want to do my mum proud.
So you changed where you stopped having sex, stopped having worldly
Yeah,
friends.
when I was 17, I met a Jehovah's Witness boy, and he really wanted to date me, but he was baptized and I wasn't, so he wasn't allowed to. So basically, I chose to get baptized so I could be in a proper relationship with him. And I didn't really understand exactly what it meant to be baptized. It was never fully explained to me that I was giving my entire life up for a religion, for Jehovah, that I would never ever want to do anything that could displease, that I would never ever give in to an urge as an imperfect human. This wasn't fully and properly explained to me.
So you're pressured into baptism.
Absolutely.
For this guy to be your boyfriend.
Yeah.
And it's normal, like at that age you learn the doctrine, but you don't fully embrace the consequences that this is till you die.
That's exactly right, and I really didn't understand that it was till I die. And sometimes things can sound really exciting because, you know, getting baptized means that we can get married and I can have a white wedding and we can have a beautiful house and children and live a great life. But realistically, that's not how life works, always, not for everybody. And for me, it didn't. And I didn't understand that if life didn't work that way, would I still want to have made the decision to get baptized in that moment? 100% no. But you make the decision and you can't turn back on it.
And what's disturbing now, so you're at 17, still didn't appreciate how much it encompassed, and yet now there's more and more experiences of people at 10 or 11 or 9 and 8 even, and how can someone be making a lifelong choice for that? Your family, your family connections are at stake.
So, essentially, I couldn't even get a credit card for $1,000, but I could sign away my entire life to a religion. And every step forward, every single thing that I did, I could stand for, and a 10-year-old could stand for. Like, that's so unfair that anybody that's not an adult should not be able to make that decision.
Yeah, and I mean, they'll say it's not about a religion, it's about a dedication to Jehovah, but you can dedicate yourself to Jehovah, but this is signing yourself up to an organisation that then can disfellowship you.
That's exactly right. Absolutely. So after that relationship ended, and it was quite a toxic relationship, after that ended, I met my first true love. And we were together for 7 years, and this was the first time that I ever felt a connection with somebody, that I ever felt safe. I have never loved somebody like that at that time in my life. And so for the first time, I understood what sex with somebody that you love was like. And so obviously I explored that avenue because finally I felt safe and I felt comfortable and I understood that sex was actually a beautiful thing. And so unfortunately that meant that I was breaking a rule.
And he was a Jehovah's Witness?
He was from a family of Jehovah's Witnesses but wasn't baptised or an unbaptised publisher himself. And it was the first time that I ever felt love, and we were absolutely the best of friends for over 7 years we were together. We were in a sexually active relationship, a loving sexually active relationship, and somebody dobbed us in, and I'm not quite sure how anybody knew about our relationship, but anyway, somebody dobbed us into the elders. I straight away confessed and said, yep, that's correct, this is what's happened, and I tried to explain my situation with the way that I lost my virginity and being raped. At that time, I've never used the word rape, so I just told them my experience of what happened, of being forced to have sex with somebody that I didn't want to have sex with, and how that has affected me. I was just trying to explain to them that for the first time I had felt love sexually with somebody, and that how sorry I am that I've broken a law in Jehovah's eyes, but that I never ever thought that sexual intercourse could be like this. And for the first time I did, and that's why I kept going back, and that's why I kept doing the wrong thing, but in Jehovah's eyes, because it was just something that I had craved to have with the person that I loved. And explained to them my situation, my rape situation, and they questioned me on what I was wearing, my behaviours, I invited him, so therefore it's my own fault, was basically the outcome of that. I deserved to be raped because I approached him and invited him to the party, and I was wearing a little pretty dress.
So you was confessing, I guess, to having sex with this current boyfriend. So that was maybe good enough to disfellowship you.
Yeah.
And yet they were questioning you about a situation from several years earlier.
Before I was an unbaptised publisher even. I was nothing.
Do you know why they would have done that?
I'm not sure why they decided to get into such detail, but it made me feel disgusting.
So on their side, they may have thought that is a pattern of behaviour they're trying to prove to this fellowship.
Yeah,
but on the other hand,
did say this,
on the other hand, it's completely inappropriate because you were a victim, and it really had nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
And also, they could have said, well, there is a pattern or not, but it's the amount of detail they went into. So what sort of detail did they go into about that?
With my experience, they didn't go into too much detail at this point with him, but the detail that they went in with my boyfriend was what was disgusting.
But they did insinuate that was your fault.
Oh, 100%. The outcome of that situation was because I decided to go up to him and talk to him. I invited him to the party and I chose to wear what I wore. Therefore, it's completely my fault that the situation happened.
And do you think that what you wear puts you at fault at all?
Absolutely not. And for many years after that, I blamed myself until eventually I went to a psychologist who broke down the entire situation and absolutely proved to me that it was rape and that there was nothing about that situation that was my fault. And that took years.
So that's a really important point, because witnesses don't trust psychologists and they will go to an elder for spiritual shepherding and for comforting, but they're just not trained for that situation. In fact, they've done the exact opposite of what they should have done. They made you feel worse about yourself. When you were 15, you had absolutely zero blame in it, and you went away for several years feeling guilty. So it's just despicable that you were treated that way.
Absolutely, yeah. I decided to appeal to see if maybe a different outcome could be had.
So were you sitting there with your boyfriend, or was it just you?
Just me. They were sitting on this side, 3 of them, and I was sitting on this side by myself, little me, with 3 big men, and I haven't grown up with a father. So this was already really intimidating, as I'm sure it would be for any person to go through, but especially not having a father for my entire life. It was very, very intimidating.
And then you appealed it.
The way that they had explained it to me was that I was getting a fresh new 3 elders that didn't know me at all, and that they would sit down with me and I would have the opportunity to plead with them, to prove to them how sorry I was. But instead I walk into the room and there are 6 big guys in big black suits on that side of the board table, and I'm asked to sit there. And in that moment they asked me questions like, how many orgasms did my partner have, and did I have, and where did he ejaculate? I was so scared and intimidated. I felt like I was this small and they were huge, and I physically just could not speak. That nothing came out of my mouth, to the point where one of the elders mockingly said to me, well, why did you even bother to have this meeting, because you're not even talking now? And I just grabbed my things and I ran out of that meeting. And it was just kind of like taboo that I was disfellowshipped. To try and feel trustworthy, to feel trust towards them, and then to just have them absolutely squash it on me was a really, really painful experience. Yeah. I was disfellowshipped for 2 years and 3 months. I had tried to come back twice, and they just kept pushing me back. Matt, you're not ready, pushing me back, to the point where my mum had to call the circuit overseer and say to him, my daughter has been trying for so long. She comes into that meeting every single day. She sits at the back. She keeps her head down. She leaves straight after the prayer. It's such a humiliating situation and it's such a humiliating feeling that she's been doing that for so long, longer than anybody that we've ever seen. She's proven time and time again to them that she's sorry, and yet they won't let her back in. And within a very, very short period of time, I was suddenly reinstated. So the CEO knew that I was repentant, but the 3 elders that disfellowshipped me, they just didn't want to reinstate me. Unfortunately, when I was reinstated, other than the excited day of reinstatement where everybody comes up and gives you all the cuddles, from that day forward, I was back to being a bad associate. I was the girl who was disfellowshipped. I was not accepted anymore. The only time that people wanted to hang out with me was going witnessing. And let's face it, that's not a friendship. That you need more of a friendship than just going out witnessing. So obviously I did need friends, and I didn't want to turn to people who weren't Jehovah's Witnesses for friendships. So I took what I could get, and unfortunately they were worse associates. So I started going to Sydney every weekend, and they were all turning 18 and going out partying.
Jehovah's Witnesses?
Yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses. And, you know, getting up to a Jehovah's Witness level of mischief. And it was great. I really enjoyed being friends with them. They were the cool Jehovah's Witness kids. The people who befriended me turned out to be quite bad Jehovah's Witnesses, and I ended up getting into a relationship with one of them, unknowing that he had been in jail in the past, that he was, for lack of a better word, he was a thug, and went straight down a big wormhole of sexual immorality, drunkenness, and things like that.
So you had sex with him as well?
Yeah.
While a witness?
Yeah.
Why?
Because sex is great. I love the D. Shit. Yeah. So we actually had sex at the International Convention in the car park. Obviously knowing that we had done the wrong thing. And once I started to realise that he was not a good person to be around, that he was quite a dangerous person. So my second Jehovah's Witness relationship, and again a dangerous person, I decided I needed to cut him off and break up with him. So I did so, and I was told that he was going to be going to the elders, so I quickly ran to the elders to try and get in first, because there is a known rule that if you get there first, you get the lesser sentence of the two. So
very true.
Yes. So
if you are the first one to go forward, that's repentance. If you confess because it's already known, then that's a very bad mark.
That's right. So I went straight in there. Still got disfellowshipped. A very similar repeat of my last meeting with them. And after a period of time, I was reinstated again. When I came back in this time, this was the first time that I actually really, really felt that I wanted to be a Jehovah's Witness. I finally felt like the penny dropped and that this was my time to shine. And I was going to do everything I could to be the best version of a Jehovah's Witness that I could possibly be. So I started going out witnessing 3 to 4 times a week, big days. I was only hanging out with mature witnesses that were double my age. I really, really was trying. I was going out a lot and going out witnessing a lot, and the circuit overseer came to visit, and I'd gone out 3 times that week, door-to-door witnessing with the circuit overseer. And on the Saturday I went down to Sydney and saw some friends, and I was back Sunday morning for our meeting, which I really felt I put in great effort going out witnessing all week and being back for the meeting. Didn't miss anything bar Saturday witnessing. When I came to the meeting, I immediately felt uncomfortable by one of the elders around me. I could feel that they were unhappy with me. And at the end of the meeting, he made a beeline for me, and he said to me, Jenna, I noticed that you weren't out witnessing this morning. And I said, yes, well, I was in Manly for the weekend, but I came back early today for the meeting. And also I did go out witnessing 3 times during the week. And he continued to put me down about my efforts that week witnessing, because the CO was here and I didn't do enough. And I felt very upset, and I argued back that no, I had been out witnessing 3 times that week and it was okay. And he turned around and said to me, Jenna, I'm just waiting for you to slip up again so that I can disfellowship you. And in that moment I knew that I could not be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. I was never ever going to be good enough. It didn't matter how hard I tried, how many hours I went out each month. It did not matter. I was done. And from that moment I grabbed my things and left, and I've never turned back, and will never turn back, obviously.
you'd actually been out witnessing through the week. You don't work?
At that point, I wasn't working.
So you weren't working. So you went out.
I was working casually. Sorry.
3 times while the circuit overseer was out. Did you actually go with him?
I did actually get to witness with him, and he got to know me a little bit. I also went out witnessing with the elder.
You'd been out, and they all knew you'd been out. But,
absolutely.
So maybe because normally all the other witnesses, because they work, they go out on the Saturday. They want you to show your face. So not so much for the circuit overseer, but to prove to the congregation that that you're really repentant and you're trying hard and get the numbers up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when he told you that he doesn't, you should have been out. What did you say to him?
I just outrightly looked him straight in the eye and said, "You can go and fuck yourself." And I grabbed my things and I walked out of there. And I knew in that moment that by telling him to go and fuck himself, I would never walk back into that Kingdom Hall again.
And that was, did he take you in at the library, or was this?
No, so when I said it, I was really loud and clear, and everybody that was chattering and talking after the meeting, the place just went dead silent, and everybody just looked at me. And
so you really couldn't go back.
I said that to him.
You really would have been awkward to go back to the meetings.
Yeah. A little while later, like within a short period of time though, I was at a shopping centre. Coming out, as I was walking into the grocery store, I saw one of the elders that disfellowshipped me. Not the one that I told that to, but a different elder that had previously disfellowshipped me. And he saw me. He was coming out. He'd finished groceries and I was going in. And I quickly darted in and did all my groceries. I took my time doing my groceries. I was gone for quite a while. And as I came out of the supermarket, he had positioned himself in a way so that I was trapped. So he put his trolley to the one side of him, he extended his arm out as far as he could, and then he moved his body and he basically cornered me into the shop so that I could not leave without pushing his trolley or pushing him out the way. And he, in complete public, stood there and questioned me about the friend that I was with, what I was doing, why I was ignoring their phone calls. He really went to town on attacking me. I had people, strangers in the shopping centre looking like concerned at me as this man had me cornered in with his trolley. And I just, I've just never felt so trapped. Well, and then as it turned out after that, I was really like almost to the point where I felt harassed. Jenna, you need to come into you need to come in for a meeting. We know things about you. And I was like, I know exactly why you want me to come in because of what I said to you. And he basically made it evident to me that he was trying to get me in for a meeting so that he could disfellowship me.
Yeah. So you haven't been disfellowshipped? I
haven't been disfellowshipped.
So this is like really key. So if you'd gone into that meeting, he would have, the elders, there would have been 2 for a witness. They would have tried to get you to confess to maybe you'd done drugs or got drunk or had sex again, or maybe you didn't believe. So they just wanted something to disfellowship you over. They can't really disfellowship you over swearing at the Kingdom Hall. And the fact that you didn't go is why you're still not disfellowshipped, which is can be really important if you want to keep a relationship with family members.
Absolutely. And I'm very happy. I honestly wouldn't care now if I was disfellowshipped because I don't speak to any Jehovah's Witnesses, and thankfully my mum was so heartbroken with how they treated me that she left with me, and nobody's ever contacted her to encourage her to come back, even though she hasn't done anything wrong.
Wow, and your mother had been in it for many years, and like you say, she left the husband partly for your sake, your spirituality, so that's she was totally devoted, and no one's called her to...
Nobody called her once to see if she wanted to... No, nobody. No elders, no friends, nothing. Everybody just cut her off because of my mic drop.
So when you left, did you still think it was the truth though?
Look, I did. I did think that Jehovah was a real God. I definitely had my questions and my doubts. But I guess my experiences that follow that helped me to stop feeling like a God would be okay with anybody being like this. And I started to question why Jehovah would be okay with me being harassed and bullied by elders, having them calling me on private numbers so that they could try and get hold of me. Why God would like, let me go through all, like, these different things and think that I'm a bad person when really I'm just trying to do my personal best.
But you didn't really then, the doctrinal side wasn't the issue for you. You didn't research the doctrine, you didn't go to apostate websites or anything beforehand?
No, I just started thinking about it more and more and more in depth, and I just started thinking, well, you know, they're not necessarily doing anything to keep Jehovah's world clean and safe. They're not, you know, they're not living a completely eco-friendly life, looking after all of the animals. Like, I'm sorry, but if they were a true religion that loved and looked after everything that God created, they would all be vegans. They would never ever do anything to affect the earth at all. And they would be a lot more like an Amish community, really. Just to add in, the first time that I was disfellowshipped, I had such a fear of dying, to a point where there was a thunderstorm one night, a quite severe thunderstorm, and I rang up my best friend who had recently left the religion, and I was hysterically crying and screaming to her on the phone because I was absolutely convinced that it was Armageddon, and I was absolutely convinced that I was dying in that moment. And she could not calm me down for a very long time. And it was such a horrible feeling that I felt that I couldn't contact my mum or my closer friend, like my other close friends that were Jehovah's Witnesses, because I knew that they would all say, well, we told you so, Jenna. Like, you made the decision to go out and have sex with your boyfriend, so therefore you are going to die now. And it was such a scary experience that now, thankfully, I can laugh about over drinks with her. We love to have a good laugh about my hysterias. But the immense fear that religion has left me with, that I've had to slowly, you know, unprogram out of my mind to stop being scared. I had to immerse myself into thunderstorms so that I wasn't scared of them anymore, and so that I didn't feel that every single one was Armageddon.
So this is incredible. So I've interviewed 2 other people in the last week, and both said when there was a lightning strike, they thought Armageddon was coming. And one of them is really, really scientific, and it's like, this is a superstition because there's lightning all around the world every single day, and yet every time, and so that just shows how really deeply ingrained this fear that the Watchtower instills in you is. If you can fix something very common like a thunderstorm, lightning, an earthquake that happens all the time, and every time that happens it triggers your fear, which is just a terrible way to be controlling people. I've known people that 20 years later, after being disfellowshipped, still think they're going to die every time there's that thing happen, which you need to sort of like prove to yourself that this isn't the truth. It is just a fear tactic to control people.
Right. Yeah.
Just horrible, like that something that's going to happen commonly can affect you every time. You need to get rid of that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So just to wrap it up, like, what is your life like now? So you've been left a couple of years now, and just tell me about like what your life is like now, how things are going, and be like realistic, because the thing is, leaving is not easy. It's not like, oh, it's all fairies and roses.
Yeah. Like, I've definitely had my ups and downs. I definitely, I think the most beautiful thing has been creating friendships with people who I actually value, and we have the same values in life, and we're proper, like, we're meant to be friends. We're not forced to be friends or obliged to be friends because of a religion. We choose to be in that friendship. I've created the most amazing memories, even down to things like skydiving or just exciting experiences, going traveling overseas, you know, creating relationships with people that I would have never been able to you know, to be able to start following a career, to have big dreams business-wise or travel-wise or world-wise, and to know that the world is not just you need to go to meetings, get married, have children, repeat. That is not life. That is such a small portion of it. And there's such a big world out there that we don't get to experience as Jehovah's Witnesses. And honestly, I've never been happier. Even given things that I've been through, like my friend's suicide recently, even those things that have just been so hard and getting knocked down, like, yeah, I wouldn't change it in a heartbeat. There's nothing that would ever make me feel like going back.
Do you want to talk about the suicide experience?
Yeah, totally. My friend my friend committed suicide a few weeks ago. He was brought up as a Jehovah's Witness. He never really had any friends until he was a teenager. I didn't actually become friends with him until he was an adult, but he had a very turbulent life. He had a mum that didn't care for him the way that she should have cared for him, hygienically, emotionally, everything. And unfortunately, he hit a life breakdown, and he decided that the best decision for him was to take his own life and leave his wife and his 2 babies behind. It was such a heartbreaking and traumatic thing to hear, that I just would have never ever expected him to commit suicide. He was honestly such a goofbag, the happiest, ridiculous guy, told the worst jokes in the world, but just still could make anybody laugh. And to think that he could take his life was just unimaginable. And I contacted a witness who helped raise him, and whilst she did raise him, she also did slander him at previous times. But she was being really, really nice to me and giving me information and updates on when his funeral would be. And then obviously she did some research on who I was, and she asked me how I knew my friend and what congregation I was in. And I avoided the congregation question because I wasn't messaging her to be her friend. I was purely messaging her so that I could be at his funeral and say goodbye to one of my friends. And as soon as she found out that I wasn't a Jehovah's Witness anymore, instead of explaining the situation to me, she just sent me the scripture of Revelation 22:15, which talks about dogs and being liars and adulterers. And I don't expect any better from a Jehovah's Witness, because I understand and I do feel for them because they are so brainwashed. And I understand because I was brainwashed. And I understand because my mum was brainwashed. I get it. But to have that sent in such a painful time of losing a friend to suicide was just so heartless, and it just reminded me exactly why I left and exactly why it is so far from a true religion. It is so far from a love religion. There's nothing love about it. It's judgment, it's pain, and it's fear. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was so educational, and I really appreciate you opening up about such sensitive topics.